The Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles will be battling it out for the Super Bowl, and the big question around this game is obviously Saquon Barkley. Why? Well, because he did something that has never been done, has been done very few times in the history of the NFL. I guess I should cut myself short on that one, but the big storyline heading into the Super Bowl is undoubtedly going to be the player that had the biggest season of any of these 106 men that will be suiting up for the Super Bowl. And we have some interesting developments on that front. I have two different sources for you here. Because I think the one sets the table nicely for the second one. In an article titled 5 Factors That Will Determine a Super Bowl Licks, Jalen Hurts Ceiling, Eagles versus Chiefs in the Trenches from NFL.com by Jeffrey Chadilla, we get this from point number 2. Will Saquon Barkley keep running wild? He asks, is part of this question, he states, I guess I should say, the challenge for the Chiefs is the same one they faced against Buffalo. Find a way to slow down the run. The Texans ran for 149 yards against Kansas City in the divisional round, while the Bills gained 147 in the AFC title match. Philadelphia's rushing attack is a major step up from what either of those two teams can offer. Simply put, if Barkley runs wild, the Eagles are winning this game. He's very sure of that, it seems. But there's someone else who is very sure of this as well. In an article titled What's Saquon's bold message to the Chiefs? From Athlon Sports, from Aiden Kaufman. Fresh off a dominant 55-23 victory over the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game, Eagles star running back Saquon Barkley sent a confident message to the Kansas City Chiefs ahead of their Super Bowl Licks showdown in New Orleans. We're the Philadelphia Eagles, man, Barkley declared after his stellar 118-yard, 3-touchdown performance. We have so much talent on here. You can't make it easy on us. We know that, and we don't get enough credit. My responses will be highlighted in yellow here. I apologize for writing this out, but I wanted to get some of these points out in this fashion. Now, I'm not a fan of overreaction. I think that some of these comments have ginned up a whole lot of reaction in the media, and part of that is just because you get 2 weeks between the championship games and the Super Bowl. People have to talk about things. Stories sometimes write themselves, and a player going out and making comments such as this, are a story writing itself. This is a statement obviously made in exuberance and machismo. They have just won the NFC Championship game. They are heading to the Super Bowl. This is far from the least advisable thing that a player could say. And certainly the Philadelphia Eagles will be prepared to play against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But sometimes statements, however innocent, beg a question. And that's where we find ourselves here. The statement given, we're the Eagles. The question begged, who is that? And listen, the Eagles are not bums. I do not mean to make that point. I am not saying that the Eagles are in the Super Bowl without merit by chance or luck. What I'm saying is it's just a question. You're saying you're the Eagles. What's the resume here? We'll get into that resume throughout this video. This is, however, briefly on the top, their second Super Bowl appearance in 3 seasons. That's very hard to do. Very rarely do teams make that type of impact. 2 Super Bowl appearances in 3 seasons. But if there were a corollary question begged by Saquon, it would be this. Who are you about to play? And the answer is pretty substantial. The Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were also there for that Super Bowl a couple of seasons ago versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and they won it. And they haven't left. The Super Bowl, frankly, at this point, is the Kansas City Chiefs' house. It's where they live. 5 out of 6 appearances. Absolutely incredible. So you can say we're the Eagles and we're under-respected. No one respects us. We're disrespected. In fact, people don't give us the credit that we deserve. How much credit do the Kansas City Chiefs get for doing something which is unparalleled already? No team has ever had the opportunity to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls. To have the opportunity to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls, you have to win the first 2. There are teams who have gone to 3 consecutive Super Bowls, or I think maybe just one team that has gone to 3 consecutive. No, there's been a couple teams go to 3 consecutive Super Bowls. You don't win the first 2, you don't have the opportunity to three-peat. The Chiefs have that opportunity. I don't think they're getting the respect they deserve either. The article continues. The former Giant, who made history this season by becoming just the 9th player to rush for 2,000 yards, has been unstoppable through the Eagles' playoff run. His 477 postseason rushing yards and 5 touchdowns have helped power Philadelphia to their 2nd Super Bowl appearance in 3 years. The remarkable postseason performance follows a regular season that saw Barkley join the elite company of runners like Eric Dickerson, Adrian Peterson, and Derrick Henry in the 2,000-yard club. It's an interesting selection of the 2,000-yard rushers if you were trying to make... I don't understand why not just list all of them. Anyway, I'm not here to criticize the author. Though the Chiefs have given up 148 yards per contest in the postseason, they were 8th in the NFL during the regular season. They surrendered just 101.8 yards per game on the ground. And sure, maybe we're talking about the regular season here when we should be talking about the playoffs. Maybe we're talking about the whole enchilada. The Super Bowl and all of the weeks that led up to it. Regular season plus playoffs. It's harder to do those numbers, however. But if we're talking about all the stuff that led up to it, that's mostly the regular season. So those numbers are worth examining. And by the way, the whole enchilada involves running the ball and throwing the ball. A lot will be made of Saquon Barkley, and rightfully so. How much is made of the Eagles' passing game? It's way easier to win, as the Eagles are hoping to do, when you have both of those little aspects, those small details of football, working well. The Chiefs finished the season allowing just 218.8 yards per game through the air. The Eagles, for what it's worth, threw for only 187.9 yards per game. That was good for 29th in the NFL. So, if you were putting together a game plan for the Eagles, it would be possible to skew that game plan very, 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 very heavily towards stopping the run. Now, personally, one thing I would love to see, and I know we're not going to get to see it, but I think it would be simple enough to implement, would be a 5-2 defense just to run every once in a while on first down. A 5-2 defense, 5 down linemen and 2 linebackers. You could run the defensive backs just the same. You could run the entire defense just the same on the assumptions that you're having a blitzer. But instead of a blitzer, you just add a defensive tackle and you assume one of those defensive ends is taking the place of previously a linebacker that would have been on the blitz. That way, your entire defensive backfield, 4 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, 6 players, you have the coverage called to execute. That would be something that I would love to see rolled out in the Super Bowl. I think that it would cause fits, and Spags is a good enough coach to be able to implement something like that in just a couple of weeks, especially if you don't have crazy different quirks out of it. When asked, the article continues, when asked about facing the Chiefs, who are aiming to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls, Barkley remained unfazed. "Whoever plays us next," he said, "good luck." There's no whoever, Mr. Barkley. The next in question is the team aiming to be the greatest in the history of the NFL. This is where the disrespect comes in. Telling someone, you've seen Taken. Liam Neeson, the guy who abducts his daughter, says, "Good luck trying to find me." Well, if we're going to add to the list of nicknames for Patrick Mahomes, this would be a great opportunity. You're talking to Patrick Mahomes on the phone, and he says he wants to win the Super Bowl, and you tell him, "Good luck." The Eagles are playing with fire. If anyone, and I mean anyone, is going to take the words "good luck" to heart as the deepest insult possible, it's Petty Leavon. You don't want to invoke the ire of Petty Leavon, because Petty Leavon has won a lot of playoff games, more than anyone with the exception of Tom Brady. More than anyone with the exception of Tom Brady just prior to the season during which he will turn 30 years old. Petty Leavon is the... So there's Clark Kent and there's Superman, right? There are all of the... When you're looking at people who... There's Michael Jordan and there's Playoff Mike. We thought that there was Patrick Mahomes and Playoff Patty. We thought that. We thought that there was Patrick Mahomes and the Red Reaper. We thought that. We thought that there was Patrick Mahomes and Showtime. We thought that. We thought those things. Remember, we thought early in his career that it was the primetime lights that made Patrick Mahomes come to life, do those weird left-handed passes, roll out and throw back against his body, underhand toss things. Turns out that's not the case. It turns out that the real deciding factor for Patrick Mahomes, the real shift, the real gear shift in Patrick Mahomes' performances is when he stops being Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of all time, and becomes Petty Leavon, the guy who wants to swing his cane at your kneecap because he doesn't enjoy the fact that you're having a nice day. That's Petty Leavon, and goading him on by saying good luck is ill-advised. The article continues. This bold statement came before Kansas City secured their spot with a thrilling 32-29 victory over the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. The Super Bowl matchup presents an intriguing clash between Barkley's explosive running and a Chiefs defense that allowed the 8th fewest rushing yards during the regular season, 101.8 per game. However, recent playoff performances by Joe Mixon, 88 yards, 1 touchdown, and James Cook, 134 total yards, 2 touchdowns, suggest Kansas City's run defense may be vulnerable to elite backs. Vulnerable to elite backs would be one way to see it. It might also be worth examining whether or not the Kansas City Chiefs were able to focus on one aspect of the previous offenses. Or did the Chiefs have to play things pretty even across the board? Well, the Bills finished the season with 227.9 yards per game through the air, good for 9th in the NFL. The Bills are a team that have to be prepared for as a dual-threat offense. Josh Allen can throw the ball. He can throw it a long way. He has some good targets, but he can also run the ball. And so can his running back. The Texans fared worse this season, throwing for 207.4 yards per game, which was good for 21st in the NFL. But this was largely due to a sophomore slump from their quarterback, C.J. Stroud. However, C.J. Stroud's rookie season evidenced that he is plenty dangerous. C.J. Stroud could beat you with his arm. C.J. Stroud is mobile enough to be able to keep things alive long enough to beat you with his arm. His running back, Joe Mixon, absolutely shut down the game versus the Chargers. That Texans offense was one for which you had to prepare even-handed across the board. For their part, the Eagles' third wide receiver, Jahan Dotson, had 216 yards on the season. Their third wide receiver, Jahan Dotson, had 216 receiving yards on the season. This could leave the Kansas City Chiefs with extra assets to dedicate to the running game. The Chiefs will almost undoubtedly leave Trent McDuffie on an island and then task the rest of the defense with whatever receiving targets are out there. And guys, Jalen Watson has been doing very, very well in his return as well. Jalen Watson with an additional week to rest and recover before the Super Bowl. Here's what I imagine is very likely in the Super Bowl. Probably a whole lot of man coverages. You have man coverages that frees you up to play more aggressively against the run. We have seen time and time again with this Chiefs defense, even back when they were struggling more than they are struggling now, that when an offense is unidimensional, maybe they can only pass and there's no real running threat, or maybe they only run and there's no real passing threat. In those situations, the Chiefs are normally able to step up because Steve Spagnuolo is very good with game plans. Steve Spagnuolo is very good at taking away your strong hand and making you beat him with something else. So, if the Eagles do decide to be decidedly run heavy against the Kansas City Chiefs, whether or not the Chiefs have recently struggled versus the run, I think they'll be able to do decent against it. The article continues, Chiefs head coach Andy Reid, known for his defensive expertise, acknowledged the significant challenge ahead, calling Barkley one of the best running backs in the history of the game. The praise from Reid adds another layer of intrigue to what promises to be a fascinating tactical battle. Andy Reid, defensive genius. You read it here first. The article continues, for Barkley, who signed a 3-year deal with Philadelphia after 6 seasons in New York, this moment validates his decision to join the Eagles. That's why I came here, he reflected. That's one of the first conversations I had with Howie Roseman. That's a conversation I had with my family. I came to Philadelphia to be part of games like this. The Super Bowl, of course. But rather than take this opportunity in a snarky direction to make some snarky comment, something snide and probably sarcastic, I think that this quote from Barkley actually gives us an interesting talking point. A talking point that is more in tune with what he's actually saying than the other things that I have said in this video in order to try to combat what he is saying. Barkley joined the Eagles because the franchise, the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, present an opportunity to win. Obviously, this opportunity was much better than the one he had in New York. One of the better opportunities in football. I mean, aside from, maybe Buffalo, right? Buffalo has well, maybe better than Buffalo. I'd have to go back and look at it. But since 2018, so, okay, let me backtrack because I got sidetracked. Barkley went to the Eagles in order to win, in order to be a part of big games. Big games in the NFL, it's only the playoffs. There's no big games in the NFL that aren't playoff games, that aren't the Super Bowl or en route to the Super Bowl. But since 2018, the beginning of the Mahomes era, the Eagles are 6-5 in the playoffs. The Eagles, whom Barkley chose because they give him a definitive advantage over most franchises in the NFL, are 6-5 in the playoffs. Mahomes, in that same time period, is 17-3. The Eagles have around 66% of the appearances that Mahomes has wins. Mahomes has been in 20 playoff games since 2018. The Eagles have been in 11. Nearly twice the playoff appearances in that same amount of time. Now, Barkley, I'm not saying that he was wrong. What I'm saying is he's absolutely right. Barkley chose to go to the Eagles in order to be in more big games. Barkley went to the Eagles in order to play in Super Bowls. The Eagles give him a good opportunity at that, not as good an opportunity as the Kansas City Chiefs. The article continues, the Eagles were in fact about half the opportunity that he gets from the Kansas City Chiefs, that a player gets from the Kansas City Chiefs. Half the opportunity that Justin Watson has. The Eagles' run to Super Bowl licks has been marked by offensive dominance, with Barkley's ground game opening up opportunities for the passing attack. His presence has transformed Philadelphia's offense into one of the most balanced and dangerous units in the NFL. Balanced is a stretch. The article continues, based on Barkley's performances and unwavering confidence, the Chiefs defense will have their hands full trying to contain one of the game's most dynamic players, undoubtedly. This is true. But so too will the Eagles' offense have their hands full with Spags' defense. Ask Josh Allen. And those two things, maybe they equal each other out, maybe they don't. Pretend that the Eagles' offense gets the better end of the Kansas City Chiefs' defense. Will that be enough to compensate for what Mahomes is doing on the other side of the football field? That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And I hope to have you back for the next one.